The ACLJ is now back in court with what could be a landmark case against the cable news network, against CNN, for perpetuating something that their organization knew to be untrue against Alan Dershowitz, famed lawyer, celebrity lawyer, if you will. Again, this is not usually how everything lines up, but when you have Alan Dershowitz suing CNN, where's the ACLJ get involved? And we get involved because of not necessarily even the merits of this specific case, but because the standard that has been in place and has been established since the 60s just does not reflect the media landscape of 2025.
No, you're exactly right. And, you mentioned earlier, Logan, that it's almost impenetrable. It really is impenetrable. If you're a public figure and the media attacks you, President Trump has seen this. It's basically, we tell clients, sorry, there's nothing really we can do. Now, what's interesting here is in Professor Dershowitz's case, which it's quite an honor for us to represent the leading constitutional law professor in American history. He was representing President Trump with me and Jordan at the Senate floor during the impeachment. And he made a statement of how the impeachment laws are supposed to work under the Constitution, what constitutes an impeachable offense. And CNN, after knowing exactly what he said, all their commentators went on, made up a thing called the Dershowitz Doctrine, which there is none, and said completely the opposite of what he said. And Logan, they had the tape. The whole world saw it, and they continued this for a couple of days. They never retracted it. So Professor Dershowitz filed a lawsuit. The judge said that if there was ever a case of defamation, this was it. But the only thing standing in the way between Professor Dershowitz and justice is a Supreme Court opinion called New York Times versus Sullivan, which was in 1964, which gave media heightened protection. But the media landscape was totally different then. Now you have everybody's media. So what you've got is, as you mentioned, this impenetrable wall. We're challenging New York Times versus Sullivan. We also believe that the burdens that they place on plaintiffs is outrageous in these kind of cases. And let me take it a step further. It's not just, how does this impact CNN? It impacts everybody. Because as Logan, as you said, these are calls we get, including from the president all the way to Professor Dershowitz, to other people that, the attacks that come and nobody can take legal action. We're hoping to change that. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, and Justice Gorsuch have all questioned the law, saying it was created out as a political decision, not a legal one. It's not rooted in the Constitution. And we have filed this morning, which you're right, folks, we worked right through the holidays to get this brief done. The petition for certiorari, it has been filed as of about 45 minutes ago. So we are now officially at the Supreme Court of the United States. And what I think is probably it is one of our biggest cases we've ever had. The implications are huge. And our ACLJ members and donors have made this possible. And it was a lot of legal work. We had 5 lawyers plus me working on this case pretty much for the last 2 months. It's been our project. So I'm excited, very pleased with the product. The other side gets to respond, then we'll respond again, and we'll probably know, end of the spring if they're going to take it or not. If they do, we will argue it next year. I'm optimistic. There are justices calling for this decision to be overturned. It's time, and we're optimistic, and I think we've got the perfect case for it.
Yeah, it's a long process. I want to make sure people know that you're hearing about it today, and it's not going to be answered tomorrow. But we have to have a team on board pretty much working these Supreme Court cases almost on a full-time level on these kind of scale when it comes to these kind of cases. This is not something that is, we send off a demand letter and then we wait for it to come back. This is something that we have to be really on point about. That's why you got to have the best of the best. That's why we have something like a triple match for the next couple days. So if you want to support the ACLJ, because look, at a bare minimum, you may be watching this going, I don't know if the media should. Their scrutiny shouldn't be that hard. Maybe that you believe it should be a bit more open to how things are right now, where, like you said, if you're a public figure, it is just sort of fair game. However, I think what we all can agree on, that it's at least time, and the way media has changed, it is at least time for the court to weigh in for the first time since the 60s on this.
That's right, Logan. And this is another angle as well I find so fascinating about the history of this case and the case as well, is that Professor Dershowitz was a law clerk for Justice Goldberg when this was decided. And Justice Goldberg wrote a concurring opinion in the New York Times v. Sullivan. So his history with this goes back to when it was decided and is now with the ACLJ fighting against what is happening in the current landscape, because even he realizes that things have changed. But I also wanted to bring this up and ask you about this, is that when you look at the First Amendment, is that it makes protection for the no law respecting establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise of speech, the freedom of speech or the press. And then also we get down to one that many people don't talk about as much, but we at the ACLJ fight for, is the petition the government for a redress of grievances. These are all clauses within the First Amendment. However, what New York Times versus Sullivan seems to have done is tip the scales in favor of the press to some degree, giving them an enhanced protection, while those that may be subject to not being able to address get a redress of their grievances by petitioning the government because the scales have been tipped for the press. Is that something that we're addressing here as well?
Well, of course, but it's more than tipping the scale. It's pretty much eliminated the right to petition the government. By the way, the petition to government is not just a petition to Congress. That includes going to court, because you can't win. I mean, the court here, the lower court, who ruled against Professor Dershowitz and said, we're ruling against Professor Dershowitz because New York Times versus Sullivan, even though they say, of course he didn't say what they said he said. Now, I mean, think about that for a moment. So the First Amendment is not a license for libel and slander. That was never the founders' intent. So they will still be First Amendment protections. You're going to have to show truth will always be a defense that the media can use, and that's fine. But this enhanced protection, and by the way, Alan Dershowitz, not only clerk for Justice Goldberg, who wrote a concurrence, he worked on that concurrence. But the concurrence was limited to not public figures, but public officials. And that was basically government figures. By the way, I don't think it was right as that either, but there's a big difference between an elected official who's got the apparatus of government to defend them versus a private citizen who happens to be a public figure. So it's got huge ramifications. It will be very helpful as we move forward with real freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But there needs to be some accountability. People call this program all the time and say, we want some accountability. Well, this is a way to get it. But again, we need everybody supporting our work. This is just the first round. We filed our opening petition brief, which is about 30 pages plus attachments. It's probably 200 pages. They will respond, and then we will respond again. So I want to encourage everybody that's listening to this broadcast right now, support the work of the American Center for Law and Justice. Logan and Jordan and Will are doing a great job on the broadcast and great job in court, but your support keeps all this momentum going forward, and we encourage you to do that at aclj.org. I did it yesterday. I encourage everyone to do it.